It might be a bit of a theme to our lives right now. We've got one thing to celebrate and one thing to worry about. If you've been on any form of social media this weekend, you likely saw a ton of photos of kids posing after getting their vaccine. Many are smiling, some clearly shed a tear or two. The adults on the other side of the camera, well, we can guess they're smiling too and maybe shedding a few tears as well. The vaccinating of 5 to 11-year-olds was the latest big move in this province's fight against COVID-19. But as we mentioned, it's not all celebration. A new strain of the coronavirus has been discovered, and that's got people worried and watching what happened around the world, including in Canada, where 2 cases of the Omicron variant have been confirmed in Ottawa. Another is suspected. Now, if you have questions about either of those subjects or anything else having to do with the coronavirus or vaccines, now is the time to give us a call. Once again today, we're joined by Dr. Joseph Blondeau. He's head of microbiology at Saskatoon's Royal University Hospital and teaches about infectious disease at the University of Saskatchewan. Remember, though, Dr. Blondeau is not part of the policy decisions made by the government, so he can get neither blame nor credit for that. If you do have a question, though, give us a call right now. It's 1-800-716-2221. You can email bluesky@cbc.ca. Tweet us at blueskycbc. We're also live streaming today's program on our CBC Saskatchewan and CBC Saskatoon Facebook pages. Put your question in the comments section, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. We're very grateful Dr. Blondeau is spending the noon hour with us again today. And good afternoon, Dr. Blondeau.
Hey, Garth. How you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you doing? How are you holding up?
I'm doing well. I beg your pardon?
How are you holding up?
Well, I was conversing with some of my colleagues in the province, and the last thing we wanted to be dealing with right now was, the possibility of another variant, and here we have one, and so we're all feeling a little bit down a bit that this could be something that we'll have to worry about going forward. Yet, the evidence on it is very, very limited. Because we're all looking forward to the day when this is, in the rearview mirror and just a distant memory, but it doesn't appear that we're there yet.
Okay, well, let's start with the new strain of the coronavirus, Omicron, it's been called.
Yep.
I know there's a lot we don't know yet, but what do we know?
So we know that the variant was first detected out of southern Africa, in Botswana and South Africa. And we know that it came up through sequencing data by one of the reference laboratories in South Africa where they first detected this new variant. And they were investigating an increase in the number of cases in one of the provinces, one of the most populated provinces in South Africa, when this variant was detected. And so the question became, was an increase in the number of cases due to this new variant, or was it due to some other reason? And the answer is nobody seems to know. There are a number of variables, including other variants that are circulating. So, for example, Garth, we know that the Delta variant is more transmissible than previous versions of the virus, and we also know it's associated with a higher viral load. But we don't know those details about the Omicron variant strain yet. We don't know whether it's more transmissible. There's a concern that it could be. We don't know whether or not it's associated with more severe disease. And we don't know whether or not it has enough sort of new features that it would replace some of the circulating variants, particularly Delta. So there's a lot of speculation, but very little facts at this point in time.
So what are the most pressing questions then that researchers are trying to answer?
So there's 3 right now. The first one is, does it seem to be more transmissible than other variants? Is it going to be associated with the potential for more severe disease, particularly in those that are unvaccinated? And then related to the vaccine, is there any concern that the current vaccine program would not be effective against this strain? And we're starting to see some opinions come out now to suggest that even though this variant has multiple mutations, they're saying anywhere certainly more than 20 and less than 30 mutations, and a number of those in the spike protein. But there are a number of experts that are coming out saying it's unlikely that these mutations would completely prevent our current antibody from protecting us. Again, I would caution that we need more data in order to be able to say that with some certainty, but I think that the expert opinion right now is that our circulating antibody will offer at least some level of protection against this variant.
Okay, we just got a quick note here that Quebec has just confirmed its first case of the Omicron variant.
Yeah, and there's a few other individuals that are also being investigated in Canada, and the either the molecular testing or the sequencing results are being waited on, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see more cases. Not only here, we'll see it show up in the United States, and the fact that it's in a number of European countries already, and also in Southeast Asia, I think shows that by the time we detect these variants. Because there is a delay in sequencing and whatnot, the opportunity for them to spread has already occurred.
Okay, got a question from Lynn on Facebook, and Lynn wants to know why people are saying this is now endemic and that we should just learn to live with it, and what is the marker as to whether it is endemic or not, and will it ever be?
Well, sort of in pandemic implies that you have a global susceptible population. And endemic implies that you've got a virus that's going to show up. It's going to be here for some point, for some level, for some period of time, and that you have varying levels of susceptibility within the population, and so she does raise a very good point. And at some point in time, the World Health Organization will have to make a differentiation as to whether or not this continues to be a pandemic problem or is it really an endemic problem. If it's an endemic problem, then one would imagine that we would start to see movement towards a seasonal immunization program. And on a seasonal immunization program, in fact, we're getting a little bit of a preview to what that might look like right now. I don't know if you're aware, but the United States has already moved forward and has said that anybody over the age of 18 is now eligible for a booster shot, regardless of whether if you have any comorbidities or not. In Canada, we're still giving boosters to individuals based on age or underlying medical conditions. But with and this morning, the Americans have said that they see booster shots as being an important next step in regards to this new variant. So I think what we're actually seeing is that we may see immunization be more of a regular part of dealing with this virus in terms of perhaps additional shots later on in the future. But at some point in time, it will have to transition from a pandemic to an endemic strain.
And Lindsay also on Facebook asks, we're wondering what level of vaccine coverage would allow a population to live without public health measures? Are there any place in the world that's achieved a very high rate of vaccination, and how are they doing?
So I'm not aware of any, and somebody will correct me on this, I'm sure, but I'm not aware of anybody that's over 90% at this point in time. I think some are close to it. And you have to differentiate between the eligible population and the total population. So in Canada right now, the eligible population would be anybody over the age of 5, but we still have everybody between, say, birth and 5 years of age that are not eligible. And so when you look at that, the percentage in Canada of the eligible population that are immunized is getting higher and higher and higher, particularly with kids coming on board. But we still have a percentage that are unimmunized because they're not eligible. What impact they will have on ongoing transmission, I think, remains to be seen. To answer the question directly, nobody knows what that number needs to be, Garth. Does it need to be 90%? Does it need to be 95%? We don't have that answer. But the more transmissible the virus, then the greater the likelihood it can circulate amongst the vulnerable population. So once again, this is my argument. If more of us were immunized, then less of us would be susceptible to, say, more severe infection and hopefully have a reduced likelihood to transmit the virus if we were to encounter it, having been immunized previously.
Okay, we got a question here, and I'll just put it to you. One of our listeners just wanted to know if pumping ozone gas into buildings would help kill or control the coronavirus.
I don't know. I can't answer that. I simply don't know the answer.
Okay. If you're just joining us, folks, our guest right now is Dr. Joseph Blondeau, head of microbiology at Saskatoon's Royal University Hospital. If you have a question about COVID-19 or vaccines or the new variant, give us a call. It's 1-800-716-2221. You could also email us. It's bluesky@cbc.ca or reach us on Twitter @BlueSkyCBC. Again, the number to call is 1-800-716-2221. We're also live streaming today's Blue Sky on our CBC Saskatchewan and CBC Saskatoon Facebook pages, so you can ask your question in the comments section, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. Again, though, that telephone number, 1-800-716-2221, or email your questions for Dr. Blondeau to bluesky@cbc.ca. You know, one of the things that I think a lot of folks began to wonder about when we saw that the Omicron virus arose, I guess, in southern Africa is, there's so much of the world that still needs to be vaccinated. Does that mean we're going to keep seeing new strains of this virus till we hit whatever that magic vaccination number is?
I think that the answer to that is most definitely a possibility. And so when you look at a couple of quick numbers, Garth, I think probably most of us will be shocked to know that if you look at Africa in terms of the continent, only around 10% of that continent would be classified as having at least one dose of the vaccine, compared to North America, where that would be 64%, and Europe would be 62%. So they're way, way behind. The other issue is that a lot of African countries actually have vaccine, but they don't have the infrastructure to administer it. And so the rollout of the vaccine is going to be slower there. So what does that really mean? It really means that when you have individuals, particularly if you have those that have underlying medical conditions in which maybe the virus is not cleared as quickly as it would be in somebody who's otherwise healthy, then it is believed that presents a greater risk for the virus to persist longer in those individuals and for mutations to occur. So the simple answer to the question is that yes, the possibility of new variants arising is very, very real based on the global immunization rates.
Okay, let's go to the phone lines where Dorothy is standing by in Saskatoon. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi. Hello?
Yeah, turn down your radio, Dorothy.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
There we go. That'll work. It'd be far less confusing that way. Go ahead, Dorothy.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. I should have known.
No, that's all right.
I have a question. When in the Legion matter, they came in and they did our testing or gave us our shots at the very beginning of the shots, and the doctor that I was talking to that I got my shots from said they hadn't done anything, any testing on people with Hashimoto thyroid, and I'm just wondering if they have done any since.
That's a tough question to answer because, to try and tease that type of information out of the database is a challenge, because that information is either held by the manufacturers or may have been submitted, say, as part of the package to the FDA or the Health Canada. But I would suspect that if they had any data on specific underlying medical conditions such as that, it would be a relatively few. And as such, it's hard to make any general conclusions or observations. I do know that the number of instances where there are contraindications to receiving the vaccines, particularly the mRNA vaccines, are very, very few, even though there may not be a lot of data from individuals that have some of these underlying medical conditions. And that's just because of the nature of the vaccine and the fact that it's considered to be so safe. But it's not a question I can answer directly just because there's no data that I can share with you.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was just curious because she had made the statement, so that is why I was just curious to see if they had done any since,
Yep.
That's it.
Okay, Dorothy, thanks for the call.
Thank you.
Got a question here from Jamie on Facebook, and I think a lot of people want to know the answer to this one. At what age should a person be getting the booster? A few times now I've been told I'm a healthy young 40-year-old and won't need the booster. Other places say everyone needs it. What
Yep.
is correct?
So,
What do you think?
so Garth, where this comes from is that there's good data in the literature that over time your antibodies drop off, or wane is the actual terminology. And that's not just for COVID, it's for lots of different things that are infectious in nature. And with the variants, as some variants have required more neutralizing antibody in order to neutralize them, the argument has been made that we want to keep our antibody levels at a certain level. And nobody knows what that level needs to be. But we know that if you get first and second dose of immunization, you have a very robust antibody response. So as a consequence, as those antibodies wane over time, getting a booster serves to get your antibody level back up. Now, as I said just a couple of seconds ago, the United States have decided that they're giving a booster to everybody who wants it, who's 18 years of age or older. And there's some criteria. It has to be X amount of time since your last dose, etc. And in Canada, we're doing the same thing, except it's not open to the general population. But it is my guess that the Canadian government will be opening up booster shots to a broader percentage of the population, and people who will be encouraged, regardless of your overall health status, to get a booster shot. So, for example, I'm eligible as a healthcare worker, but I'm not 65 years of age. And later on this afternoon, I'm going to get my booster shot, and I'm a healthy individual. So because I'm eligible and because I understand the science behind it, I'm not hesitating to go get my booster shot. And neither should others.
Do you know offhand just who is eligible in Saskatchewan right now?
I still believe that it's over 65 years of age and anybody with an underlying medical condition. Now, I believe the government is issuing letters to those people who are deemed to be eligible. And I don't think that has changed, but I'll stand corrected if the eligibility requirement has changed. And you have to be 6 months from your last or your second dose.
Well, I ask because at one point I thought I read that people who had 2 doses of AstraZeneca would be eligible, and that's a goodly proportion of the population over 60.
Yeah, that's
but
different.
We don't know.
And the reason why that's different is because of the problems internationally with recognition of AstraZeneca vaccine by some countries. So some countries have not approved that particular vaccine, and if you require, the United States was flip-flopping on whether they would take anybody with either AstraZeneca or AstraZeneca and an mRNA vaccine as being fully vaccinated. So I think that people who previously had AstraZeneca had an option to get an mRNA vaccine in the event that travel was going to be an issue. So I think we need to clarify those points, but that remains my understanding.
Okay, we're going to take a quick news break in a moment, but we'll take caller Chris in Saskatoon first. Hi, Chris.
Hi. I'm just wondering if we have any data about the false negative rate of the rapid antigen tests, and also if we have any information about how accurate that'll be against the new Omicron variant.
I can't tell you about the Omicron variant. I don't know that at this point in time. That's, I guess, Garth, that would have been the fourth question that's being investigated right now, is whether or not the current testing platforms are sufficient for detecting this virus. We know that the PCR, the nucleic acid tests are, but whether or not any of the antigen tests need to be relooked at is an unknown question at this point in time. So I don't know the answer to that question. In regards to the other question, depending on which, and I don't have them all listed by name, but depending on which antigen tests you're using, the sensitivity, that is the likelihood that a positive will be detected, can be in that range of 60 to 80%, maybe a little bit higher. But if you're negative, detecting that you're negative, then it's much higher. So the antigen tests are not as sensitive as the PCR tests.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you know what the rates are, or for the antigen test? Like how many would be false negative or false positive on the antigen test?
I do not. I do not. But if you, and the problem is that we are actually collecting that data in order to be able to sort of look at that, but we just don't have it at this point in time for Saskatchewan that I can comment on. It's not that I'm hiding anything, I simply don't know the number.
Well, that's fair enough. Okay, folks, if you're just joining us, our guest is Dr. Joseph Blondeau, head of microbiology at Saskatoon's Royal University Hospital. He teaches about infectious disease at the University of Saskatchewan. If you have a question about COVID-19 or vaccines, please give us a call right now. It's 1-800-716-2221. You can email bluesky@cbc.ca, tweet us at blueskycbc, or you can follow this program on our CBC Saskatchewan and CBC Saskatoon Facebook pages. And if you are following us on Facebook, just put your question in the comments section, and we'll get to it as quickly as we can. Right now it's 12:30, and Tori Gillis has a news update for us. Hi, Tori.
Hey there, Garth. Well, we'll take you to the courtroom in Regina in our upcoming newscast, where the Crown has closed its case in the sexual assault trial of Christopher Duke in Regina. He's accused of sexually assaulting a person under 16. And now that the defense has begun presenting its evidence, Duke is in the witness box in his own trial. So more details coming up on that story. As well, Saskatchewan is looking at a record $2.7 billion deficit. And according to the province's mid-year budget report released today, it says this past summer's drought is to blame. It's forecasting $2.4 billion in crop insurance claims, and more than half of that has already been paid out. Also, a tax fight with CP Rail is coming up at the legislature today, and the provincial government will be making a motion to change the Canadian Constitution. Right now, CP is suing the province to get $341 million in tax money returned. That's because the company signed a contract 140 years ago that gave it tax exemptions in return for building the Transcontinental Railway. And the only way to close that tax loophole, which the province wants to do, is to amend the Constitution. So we'll have more details on that story coming up as well.
Thanks very much, Tori.
Thanks, Garth.
Tori Gillis on the news desk this afternoon. We got that funny little delay. It messes me up every time. Okay, again, folks, our guest today is Dr. Joseph Blondeau, head of microbiology at Saskatoon's Royal University Hospital. He's here to answer any questions you might have about COVID-19 or the vaccines. Our telephone number, as ever, is 1-800-716-2221. Email bluesky@cbc.ca or reach us on Twitter at blueskycbc. Catherine Rogers is vaccination coordinator for the Regina General Hospital, and she just emailed some clarification for us. And Catherine writes, we are currently recommending that all people who have had 2 AstraZeneca doses have an mRNA third dose, regardless of age, at 6 months past their second dose. So there, that clears that up.
And Garth, one other thing I just looked up during the break for news was that the eligibility in Saskatchewan, 65 and older, individuals living in the far north and those on First Nations communities, age 50 years and older, and healthcare workers, of course, have now been added to the eligibility list for booster doses as well. And in addition to those that have underlying medical conditions. That's what I'm seeing posted.
Okay, so we're still unclear on people with 2 doses of AstraZeneca. But according to Catherine, the vaccination coordinator at RGH, if you have 2 doses of AstraZeneca, then you would be eligible for an mRNA third dose at 6 months past the second dose of AstraZeneca. Okay.
Thanks, Catherine, for sending that in.
Yes, it's helpful. Thanks very much for listening, and thanks for helping out, Catherine. Let's go to the phone lines. Marty is in St. Victor. Hi, Marty.
Hi. Dr. Blondeau, thank you so much for doing this for us. I'm always amazed at your breadth of knowledge. My question is, when the virus mutates into these new variants, is it getting more robust or is it getting weaker?
So it could be both. That's a great question, actually. There are some mutations that a virus may go through that is lethal, meaning that it kills the virus, and you would never know about those because then the virus is dead. And then there are other mutations which could give some type of an advantage to the virus. So if we think about the Delta virus variant, for example, it now has these features of being more transmissible, and individuals have higher viral loads. So that obviously facilitates the spread of the virus, and that's something which was different, say, than the original COVID strain. So mutations can give rise to characteristics that can actually be beneficial to the virus, and can actually give rise to mutations which could be less beneficial and even lethal. So it could be either or.
Okay, so every variant that comes out, we have no idea what we're dealing with until it starts infecting people.
Yeah, you raise a second very, very good point, and that is that when a new variant is detected, and so for example, there's been Mu and Lambda, and there was initial concerns about those variants, yet they haven't really done anything. And so it oftentimes will take a bit of time after a variant has been detected in order to determine what properties it has and then what those properties might do to affect human health. And that's exactly where we are with the Omicron variant strain, is that it's being detected in a number of countries around the world. But at this point in time, based on what I've read this morning, most of the individuals that have been infected with it are not severely ill and they're not in the hospital. And the loss of taste and smell seem to be a common complaint. But again, we'll need to wait more data to see whether there's something beyond that.
Okay,
Marty?
so Lambda is, Omicron is the 15th letter of the Greek alphabet. Have we had 14 previous variants?
I didn't count them up, but there's been a number of variants that have been identified, and they've all been given names. You stumped me on that one. I'll have to go and look and see whether or not there's actually been 14 before it, but I know there's been quite a few, and you can see those on the Government of Canada website. If you look it up, it lists ones that are either variants of interest or variants of concern.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the call, Marty. Dr. Blondeau, is there something intrinsic about the coronavirus family that allows it to mutate so quickly?
That I'm not sure about, Garth. I know that all viruses can mutate. I think maybe one of the things that's a bit unique about COVID-19 is that you have an entire global population, billions of people who are susceptible to it, and including individuals that have a range of different underlying medical conditions. And I think that it's probably a combination of the fact that the virus has the ability to mutate and the fact that there are so many people to infect and so many people in which the virus can linger in that have underlying medical conditions that probably are facilitating the rise or the origin of these variants. So I think it's a combination of both of those things, but all viruses can mutate.
Okay. We'll go to the phone lines now. Trevor is in Rocanville. Hi, Trevor.
Hi, Garth. Hi, Dr. Blondeau. I might be able to add something to the question of boosters and who's eligible.
Sure.
I went to get my flu shot in October, and they said to me, I had already had two, I had Moderna and Pfizer, and they said, we can give you a booster shot for Moderna for COVID. So I said, sure. The funny thing is, I'm nowhere close to 70 years old, and I am probably healthier than just about anybody my age. Yet 18 years ago, I was given a cancer diagnosis, which really didn't go anywhere, but I was given the diagnosis. And in the past, when I would go for a flu shot, they'd say, well, you're kind of young. And they'd say, do you have any critical conditions? And I'd say, well, yeah, I had this diagnosis in the past, and I think I therefore got flagged as high risk. And that's why I would get a booster shot far ahead of people who are far, far more vulnerable than I am.
Yep.
My question is, why haven't doctors flagged many, many people who are very, very high risk, who do not dare get a respiratory disease, heart conditions, for instance? Why has that not happened? Because someone like me can blow right through and get a booster shot and be in pretty good health.
So I don't know that has not happened, because I do know that the government issues letters of eligibility for individuals who are identified as being high risk for underlying medical conditions. And those people have a wide range of clinical conditions. So people certainly with severe respiratory disease, including severe asthma, would be identified for being eligible for a booster shot, people who are on biological products that suppress their immunity. And so I think that is probably driven through physicians informing whoever they need to inform that they have high-risk patients, and they in turn receive a letter of eligibility from the government that tells them they can go and get their booster shot. So I think that's probably occurring, although I'm not 100% sure about the mechanism for identifying those patients.
Okay.
Okay.
Seems like a lot more could be identified.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and again, without knowing the total number of individuals who would fit within those high-risk groups, and then how many receive letters, it's hard to know what the numerator and the denominator is. But I can tell you with great assurance that individuals who are identified as high risk have received letters from the government and are eligible for their booster. I can tell you that with 100% certainty.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks for the
You're
call.
welcome.
Got an email from Margaret here. I don't know if you're going to be able to help, but here it is. Margaret writes, I've had many reactions to vaccines, and I've still not received my first shot because I can't find anyone with expertise to discuss possible side effects with. I've asked my local family doctor many times, but they just don't seem to know and have not given me an answer yet. And she points out she's in the north, and there's quite a high turnover at the clinic, so she's had to start over a couple of times. She wonders if you could recommend an expert on vaccinations for people with serious allergies or reactions to reach out to either in province or out of province. I desperately want to get vaccinated, but there's just no one who can help.
And again, does this individual, I wonder, have access to one of the medical health officers in that particular area? Because I believe all the medical health officers have been well versed on the vaccine and side effects and potential complications, those types of things. And they certainly would be a good source. The other thing is that there are usually folks at the vaccine centers that have been specially trained in order to review with individuals some of their medical conditions and their eligibility for vaccination. And I would say yes, but I won't say the name over the radio, that there are people with elevated levels of expertise on vaccination here in the province. That certainly could be a resource to answer this question. So the answer is yes, those people exist, but I won't give names out over the radio. Because I don't want them to be getting calls now from everybody.
Yeah,
right.
Understood. But your first thought would be that she'd check with her local
medical health officer.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
and
back to the
phone.
phone.
Medical health officer feels, Garth, that maybe they need a little bit more expertise, then they certainly know who to consult as well.
Fair enough. Okay, let's go to Sylvia in Regina. Hi, Sylvia.
Hello, and hello, Dr. Blondeau.
Hello.
I'm asking, actually, not a question maybe, but your expert opinion on something. My daughter and family, with 2 children, are coming from England on the 20th of December. We haven't seen them for 2 years. And we're wondering how concerned we should be about the Omicron in terms of the quarantine that might come up, the border closures, and so on. There are a lot of ramifications if they change and come like soon in the next week. But I mean, if they have to, they will do it. And I know you don't have an exact answer, but what is your opinion on that?
Well, we're in this period of the next 2 weeks where hopefully there'll be a lot of information generated on this variant and whether or not it poses a real significant risk or it doesn't. As that information unfolds, and governments may decide that they need to do more or less in regards to people that are going to travel to this particular country. And so it's a bit of a bit of a moving target in regards to what answer that I would say. But it's quite possible that they may require a screening test on arrival, is one of the things that was tossed around this morning. It may be that they would require a short period of quarantine until they can be tested to determine whether they have this variant or not. Or if the variant is deemed to be not significant from a clinical point of view, there may be nothing further. So sadly, there's no answer to your question, because anything I say today could change within the next number of days as new information becomes available.
Well, that's understandable. I just thought if you felt strongly one way or the other, we would certainly listen to your advice. But I guess we'll watch for a few days and so on and see how it goes, and then they'll have to make a decision. So I thank you for
I will tell you.
time.
I will tell you this. I am an evidence-based person. I look at evidence and then I use that to inform my thinking.
Right.
And right now, we just don't have a lot of evidence, so it's very difficult to form an opinion when all we have, there's a lot of innuendo and misinformation on social media already.
Right.
But when you look at the report from the World Health Organization yesterday, they said, here are the things that we know and here are the things that we don't know, but are still promoting, vaccine and public health measures as being the road forward to keep us protected and to try and get us out of this pandemic. So that is the official statement from the World Health Organization as of this morning.
Right. I do know that can change, on a dime when things really got different. But I appreciate you giving me that information, and between us, we'll have to make a decision. So thank you again.
Good luck with it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Got a question from Fabian on Facebook. Has this become an airborne virus?
It's still considered to be a droplet spread virus, but there are sort of large, medium, and small droplets, and small droplets can travel further than large droplets. But is it a virus, that's transmitted the same way as, chickenpox and measles and those which are truly airborne? No, it's usually attached to molecules that are liberated when you speak and cough and that sort of stuff. So not truly airborne, but clearly there's an airborne component to it.
Well, and I'm assuming you get it from breathing in those droplets.
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
And that's where the distance, Garth, of 2 meters becomes important, because if you're staying 2 meters, 6 feet, 7 feet away from somebody, then that's argued to be far enough away that any droplets that are liberated from somebody will fall before they have a chance to. So they don't remain in the air for prolonged periods of time.
Okay, I want to move on to what's happening here in Canada. Kids aged 5 to 11 have been getting vaccinated. What's different about what they get?
So it's about a third of the dose of the adult vaccine, but it's the same vaccine for all intents and purposes. And what's been noticed with children is that some of the side effects from vaccination are, the same as what's been noticed in adults. They may get sore arm and some redness, maybe a little bit of swelling at the injection site. In some children, they may have a bit more systemic symptoms like some chills and fatigue and some joint pain and stuff like that, headache, just that sort of crummy feeling. But then those seem to resolve within 24 to 48 hours. And this morning at CrossFit, one of the parents there told me that her 2 children were immunized within the last few days, and they went through it with flying colors. No side effects whatsoever, and she, as a parent, was thrilled about it. So far, the vaccine uptake has seemed to be going quite well.
All right. How do they determine the dosage for these kids between 5 and 11? Because there can be a huge range in sizes of, take 11-year-olds, for instance. It can be a huge range in size. So is it based on size, or is there something intrinsic about that age group that means 30% is enough?
I think that the data that we haven't seen, that probably the regulatory agencies have seen, is that in most of these studies, there may be a dosaging component of the study that's done where there may have been a subset of kids that were given one dose, a subset given a different one, and then a different subset given the actual dose that they settled on. And within that, what they would look for is what the reaction was, not only in terms of efficacy and the development of neutralizing antibodies, but any side effects. So let's just say, for example, if the adult dose gave more side effects than the current approved dose in children, then that would be less desirable. So it would be a combination of those dose response studies, safety data, and whether or not the lower dose had the desired impact in terms of, and one of the parameters that was measured was the robustness of the antibody response. And so all of those parameters were met with this reduced dose that's currently being given to children. And that's how they came to it.
Okay, and on this topic, got an email from D, and D writes, how do we get kids to stop spreading the virus by vaccinating them if the vaccinated person can still spread the disease? Knowing kids have milder symptoms and don't get as sick, how would you convince parents who are on the fence to go ahead and get the kids vaccinated?
Well, because there's a lot of reasons, Garth, and I think the big reason is that a vaccine, and this data has been proven in data sets from industrialized countries all over the world, is that vaccinated individuals are less likely to get severe disease. And while it is true what the individual had said was that children are less likely to become severely ill and are less likely to be hospitalized and less likely to die, that number is not zero. And, there are a number of kids that can have a multi-system inflammatory syndrome and a number of children that can have long COVID as well. And so immunizing your children protects the children from the likelihood that you can end up with these unfortunate conditions. As well, having a greater percentage of the population, including children, immunized, even though a vaccinated person can still be infected, they're less likely to be shedding virus. They will be shedding virus, but they're less likely to be shedding it than, say, an unvaccinated individual, and they're less likely to get severe disease. And I think that those are really the important elements. Plus, having the children immunized protects the overall family as well, Garth, particularly if you have vulnerable individuals within the family. So once again, to remind you that if you look at the data sets, both in Canada and the United States, individuals that are getting infected when they're vaccinated tend to be older and tend to have underlying medical conditions, and some of those individuals are requiring hospitalization and some die. So once again, having children vaccinated protects your family unit, protects your bubble, contributes to protecting society. There are a whole bunch of different lists, and I would encourage people to go to the website for Johns Hopkins and look at their website in regards to vaccination for kids, and they list a whole bunch of great points. And just go to Johns Hopkins COVID vaccination for kids, and it will come up, and I would encourage everybody to have a look through that.
I don't want to take a lot of time with this because we've got some callers left I'd like to get to, but why are about 28% of our current COVID cases amongst those who are fully vaccinated?
Once again, we're getting people who are vaccinated and have become exposed to the virus and become infected, but the vast majority of those people are they're mildly symptomatic or not symptomatic. They're picked up for whatever reason, exposure, or maybe they have some symptoms and they're being tested and found to be infected. And those who end up with more significant disease tend to be older and tend to have underlying medical conditions. Once again, as we've said, and I'll repeat again, the vaccine is not 100% effective. It's really good. It's one of the better vaccines that we have certainly on the market, but it's not 100%. And this has been repeatedly shown, again, in databases, certainly here in North America and Europe. Yep.
Okay, let's go to Marvin in Carrot River. Hi, Marvin.
Hello. A couple of weeks ago when Dr. Blondeau was on, I mentioned that there was a new virus out and that had never been heard of yet, but I'm wondering why the World Health Organization always seems to be behind on announcing this. Like, no, we have it in Canada, and yesterday you were saying that they announced that this is happening. It was known 3 weeks ago that it was around, but they wouldn't warn anyone about it.
Yeah. So, I can't speak on behalf of the World Health Organization, but I do know that they have a number of expert working groups that are brought together whenever the need arises in order to evaluate data on a new entity, and then to try and make decisions and recommendations as to what the significance of that finding is. In regards to the Omicron variant, that variant had probably spread before the folks in South Africa had an opportunity to characterize it and then identify that this was a new variant. And when you keep in mind that you can be anywhere on this planet in less than 48 hours through air travel, and it may take longer than that in order to do a whole genome sequence on a virus in order to determine whether something has changed about it, there is a delay. sadly, between when a new variant may arise and when it actually gets detected by laboratory investigation. And then you then have to go through the process of having people sit down and evaluate that data. So there is a natural delay or a lag. And at this point in time, our technology doesn't allow us to go much faster. But I think that's part of the explanation.
Okay, I've got a question here from Tara on Facebook that I think I'd like to get to.
Yep.
Does vaccinating people in the height of a circulating virus put evolutionary pressure on the virus to change, causing the variants?
I would say it's probably the opposite. I don't think that the vaccination puts the evolutionary pressure. I guess it's theoretically possible. I think what's more likely is that we tend to see this even with bacteria, Garth, and when bacteria develop resistance to antibiotics. It's when they're in an individual and are there for a prolonged period of time. And maybe with different types of pressures, including antibiotics, that resistance can occur. So in the context of the virus, I think the fact that, you have so many susceptible people in the world to this virus and so many with underlying medical conditions that the breeding grounds for variants to arise is just ripe.
Okay, one more question I want to get in before we run out of time. We've addressed this often, but, given that children became eligible last week, we know people have questions about vaccine side effects. To your knowledge, what is the risk of myo or pericarditis for kids getting the shot?
Very low. There's some misinformation that people are trying to correct. I don't know that we have the actual numbers, but what we do know in regards to the myocarditis or pericarditis, we know that it's more common in adolescents and young adults and less so in children. It's more common in males in that adolescent and young adult group. It's more common following the second dose. And usually occurs within the first 7 days of vaccination. We know that, and we also know it tends to resolve quite quickly on its own. That's what we know. Of course, as that 5 to 11 age group are being vaccinated, the various safety alert systems around the world are at a heightened alert right now, looking for any potential serious side effects that might be reported. And then once those are reported, they have to be investigated in order to determine whether they potentially relate to the vaccine. But that's what we know at this point in time. And I think more information on that would be forthcoming as more kids get vaccinated.
Okay, I'm going to try to squeeze in one last caller. Brian, near Greenwater. We're almost out of time, but you got about a minute. Go ahead.
Okay, Dr. Blondeau, my question is about the Spanish flu. Is it still around? Or is and called something else, or has it mutated and has become one of our common winter colds or flus, or has it died out?
So the Spanish flu, So the Spanish flu obviously was the strain that was responsible for the Great Pandemic back in 1918 to 1920. And influenza has undergone a number of changes over time because of two very important proteins called hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. And it changes over time. We see about a pandemic strain about every 40 years with influenza. And so is a possibility that this virus either is around or could reemerge? Absolutely, because it's the nature of influenza virus. So I don't recall off the top of my head the current formulation for this year's flu vaccine, but I think it's H3N2. And I don't remember off the top of my head what the Spanish flu was, but influenza changes all the time. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Well, on that note, Dr. Blondeau, thank you once again for sharing your lunch hour with us. I know you're a really busy guy, and we really appreciate that you have given of your time so generously over the last almost 2 years now.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. You take care and everybody be safe.
Dr. Joseph Blondeau is head of microbiology at Saskatoon's Royal University Hospital and teaches about infectious disease at the University of Saskatchewan. Tomorrow on Blue Sky, Saskatoon parents say they were terrified last Wednesday their 9-year-old son with autism was missing for an hour because he refused to get on the school bus and the bus left without him. Our guest tomorrow on Blue Sky is a search and rescue expert who trains people how to support those with sensory issues to avoid people going missing in the first place. We want to hear from you. Are we doing enough to keep kids with disabilities safe? That's tomorrow on Blue Sky. We'll chat then. Until then, folks, have a great afternoon, and we'll chat a little later. Bye now.